This is the HR Exchange Podcast, and I'm your host, Mason Stevenson. On this week's episode, we talk about the coronavirus and HR's response to the pandemic. My guest is Akebono Break USA Vice President and Assistant General Manager of Global HR, Eric Torigian. We discuss how the crisis has impacted companies all over the world, what HR professionals should be doing right now, and how this situation will change work in the future. Certainly an important topic for our current times, but before we get to the conversation, a word about the HR Exchange Network. Join the HR Exchange Network, your first stop for the latest research, strategies, and news from the HR space, and be among the first to register for our quarterly online events and free webinars, so you never miss key insights from your peers. That's hrexchangenetwork.com.
All right, everyone, thanks for joining us for another podcast today. Super relevant topic we're going to be focused on, and that's the coronavirus and COVID-19 and HR's kind of response to that. With me to talk about it is a repeat guest, Eric Torigian. He's with Akebono Break. He's also one of our HR Exchange Advisory Board members. He contributes to the website, and he actually presented on this topic as part of our Future of Work online event. So I thought it'd be a great idea to kind of bring him back on and kind of talk through some of this, again, in terms of what HR really needs to be doing at a time like this. Eric, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. I know you are super busy, as all HR professionals are, so I really appreciate everything you're doing for your company and for the space, and thanks for coming on for the podcast today.
No, thank you, Mason, and thanks for bringing up the topic. I was actually thinking about rescheduling you because, like everybody, we're working from home and we're working in different conditions, and the families are all quarantined, and I have very young children. I think it's a confusing time, and they're both sitting with me in my office right now as I record the podcast, so I'll apologize if we get any background noise. But I think it's important because I think that right now is a time where people are scared and people are concerned and no one knows what's happening, and there's job situations happening all over. And I think it's time for HR to lead. And as I've talked about in a lot of previous columns and different places, HR has a tendency to say, well, when do we get our seat at the table? Well, if you're not willing to step up now as an HR leader and lead, and not just at work, but in your community and everywhere, then we're missing the boat. So thank you for bringing this up.
Hey, no problem. And I'm with you. I'm working from home as well, and I have been for a while, and will be until further notice. And my children are here as well. They're hanging out, just kind of chilling out while I'm working, and they may bust into the office at any minute, and that's okay if they do. It's just that's our reality right now, and I think it's important that we recognize that. And just like everybody else, life has to go on and work has to go on right now, be it different than maybe we're all a little used to, but that's okay.
And it's a good reality. And you know what's interesting about it to me, Mason, is it's a new reality. So things are going to change, and people are going to have new expectations about what work looks like and when work is. And I know those are some of your topics, so really looking forward to the conversation.
Definitely. Well, let's kind of start this off as we always do with kind of a high altitude look. I know it's as soon as you do that, it's going to be outdated, and I think the audience kind of knows that with everything that's changing and how rapidly it's changing. But just right now, kind of give me an idea of at least from your perspective, how this situation is really affecting HR and its ability to function, and maybe companies as a whole.
Well, yeah, that is a 50,000 foot question, right? So companies as a whole are dealing with this issue and it's a war, and we're fighting a war on a couple fronts. So one of the fronts is economic and operations, and how do we continue to run our businesses in a non-brick and mortar environment, right? So this is quarantine and these shelters in places. They're the absolute right thing to do. And we've got to get people settled down. We've got to take a pause as a country and reset. So now business still goes on. We run for-profit businesses, and we have payrolls and payables, and we have fixed costs and things that don't go away. So we've got to figure that out. But the other front are our associates and our people. And what are we doing to take care of our people, ensure their safety, and protect our ability to run when we get out of this? And what does getting out of this look like? So for me, HR's roles are, number one, ensure everybody's safety. So in an orderly fashion, HR, you've seen over the past weeks, has orderly shut this country down, moved people home, moved people into remote opportunities. It has not been easy. We've idled manufacturing across the country, really across the globe, and it's something that usually you would say would take months to plan, and we did it in days. Step number two now is, how do you keep those people engaged? How do you answer their questions? How do you manage their concerns? And then step number three becomes, what does our startup plan look like coming out of this? So that's where I think HR's main focuses are right now. And then I add a fourth one. Let me add a fourth one too to that. And I think this transcends your organization, but we have a responsibility to community. And there is a group of people, it's a grassroots activity right now. It's starting to grow, and it's called #Available Talent on LinkedIn. And it's a group of people who are trying to connect individuals who are negatively impacted by this crisis with people who still have opportunities. Because recruiting hasn't stopped. Business hasn't stopped.
Right.
It's changed. And we're trying to make these connections for people and show people there is hope and help lead. And I like to say it like this. HR, we've honed these skills over years, being advocates to the bottom line. Now it's time to advocate for the community and for people who are hurting.
I definitely agree with that. And it's interesting to me, from a personal perspective, just to kind of, really talk about how this is, impacting everything. Normally I'm the person running webinars, but last night I actually attended a webinar through an organization that I'm a member of. It's a volunteer organization through my church. And a lot of the conversation was focused on helping the community and finding those opportunities to get out there and to, while being safe, make sure you're doing the things that you need to do to check up on, your pastor or preacher, check up on your neighbors, check up on people you go to church with, because, we all are kind of isolated right now. We all are in kind of quarantine right now, and some people handle that better than others. And it's important to check in on them, just say, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? Do you need me to run to the market for you? You just need to talk on the phone for, 10 or 15 minutes. You want to FaceTime, video chat, whatever, that's part of it. And I think, and I speak from experience with my team, we've kind of been doing that. Just this week, we had like a 10-minute window for all of us just to kind of hop on and say hey to each other and tell a joke and, smile and laugh, because we've not seen each other for a couple of weeks. But we all kind of needed that. And I don't think I realized how much I needed it, until it happened. And I think that's part of, the role of HR right now is making sure, their teams are okay, not just from a working standpoint, but definitely from a personal standpoint. What you talked about in your webinar on the topic, you kind of laid out, a series of steps of how, HR's role in managing the response. And what I'd kind of like to do, I took notes, I kind of want to go through each of those and just kind of take some time to focus on each one and really talk through it. So the first one that you brought up is safety first. I think all of us, when you say that, think about, just making sure that people are safe in the workplace and whatnot. But in this situation, safety first takes on a much broader meaning.
Yes, it really does. And I start to boil safety down with this coronavirus So for me, and I'm no expert at this, and I'm no medical expert, but my interpretation of this is not going to be a step function. So we're not going to reach some magical date on the calendar and all of a sudden COVID is gone. So we're going to be dealing with this for quite some time, and it's going to continue to be a risk to people that we're going to have to manage. So I look at it like this. Manufacturing has always been a dangerous place, and there's always been challenges in there, and there's always been things that you just can't eliminate. So we've had this tree, the safety tree. So what you do is you look at a hazard, and you say, first, is this something that I can eliminate? So you try to engineer it out, you try to eliminate it, you try to get rid of the hazard. If you can't eliminate the hazard, then you say, okay, what can I do to guard the hazard so people can't come in, interact with the hazard? Then you say, okay, well, if I can't do that, what PPE or protective equipment do I give people to interact with the hazard in a safe way? And then if I can't do even that, then I say, okay, what training, what do I have to do to teach people how to interact safely with their PPE and the guarding to this hazard that couldn't be eliminated? We're going to have to use that model as a society to approach COVID. So what can we do to eliminate it? Well, we can do some social distancing, and we can do hand washing, and we can do sanitation, and we can learn to not touch our faces. And those are the things that right now we're teaching people really hard, and we're leaning on people to learn how to do. Okay, the next step then for me becomes, how do we now guard? So if I have a manufacturing operations, what can I do? Or any plant or any company. Well, can I stagger shift times if I have to have people in the office? Do I stagger people around lunchroom tables? How do I get people into the facility? Do I want to screen for temperatures? Where do I screen for temperatures? Do I get a backlog of people at a time clock? Do I have an airlock that's trapping multiple people together? So we have to manage all those things. Then we go to PPE. So now I say to people, okay, do I need to have N95 masks? Do you need hand sanitation stations? Where do I need them? Do I need to give out gloves? And then finally, for the ones that we're just not going to be able to fix, and they're going to be there, how do we teach people how to be responsible around each other and not pass this thing on? So to me, that's a big task, and that's a societal task. And that's something that's not just good for business, that's going to be required in the new world. And we'll learn how to do it, and we'll get very good at it. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Grateful Dead, I'm not suggesting this is the start of the Grateful Dead, and I'm not suggesting, or the Walking Dead. I like the Grateful Dead better. But I'm also not suggesting that this is the end of America or the end of the U.S. or the end of the current. I think this is the beginning of the most exciting period we've ever been part of. And I think that people are going to figure out how to pour their passion into it. The world's been getting ready for this for a while. We've been moving to an online world. We've been moving to a gig economy. We've been moving towards remote distributed work groups. And I think you're going to see over the next 20, 30 years, this world's going to change a lot. And people will come back to this date. And when they do, they're going to say, who led it? Who was part of it? Who is the people that made the difference? And I believe they're going to look to HR people and say, they're the ones who got us through this.
I think you're right in that things are going to change, and I think things are going to change. If anything, the change was already happening. This really kind of accelerated it. This is not my phrase, and I'm not quoting it correctly. I believe I saw it in maybe Forbes or in a LinkedIn article. But the phrase was basically, this has created the largest work from home experiment ever. And that's very, very true. I mean, everybody, if you can, is working from home right now. And once we get through this, it's going to create an interesting situation for us. One is going to be, are folks going to, just run back to work and be happy to be back in the office? Are some of them going to be like, look, I can actually do my job from home, and they're going to want to push for that even more. And companies are going to have to adjust to that and start, it works. So now we really need to focus on putting this in place. Kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I don't want to say this. I don't want anyone to take this as I'm minimizing the sacrifices that prior generations made during wartime. But this is our war. And this is our generation's, march off to war. And I was using this phrase with you the other day, but, in World War I, one of the big sayings was, how are we going to get Johnny back on the farm after he's seen the lights of Paris? But now we're saying, how are we going to get people back to work? But I'm saying, should we get people back to work? So should we try to put this back in the box? Or do we need to look at the world differently? Why not remote? Why do I need my account payable person sitting there? Why do I need, and why can't we do this? So this, to me, too, the COVID to society is a lot like somebody catching COVID, because it's not the virus that creates the change or unfortunately kills the person. It's your body's response to it. So your body's response determines whether you pass away from this or whether you survive this. And how your immune system reacts to this dictates how this comes out for you. Society's at the same place right now. How we react to COVID will determine whether this becomes a fatal illness to us or something that makes us stronger with new immunities. And we've got to take the approach and we've got to lay down and say, we're going to be stronger. And I've seen this again and again and again. When people are sick, if you have that spirit in your mind that says, I am going to survive this, I am going to be okay, you tend to be okay. And you see people who have things they shouldn't survive that are able to survive it because they have that mindset. You see some people who have something that should be very survivable and they give up, and then they actually give into it and they lose. So we can't give into this. We've got to figure out a way to become stronger.
Agreed.
And then I also have been saying, while this virus has successfully driven us apart, it's also pulled us together.
That's very true. I've been having some similar conversations with my family and friends to that effect about, even though we're not in the office, we are, we're talking to each other a little more, we're reaching out a little more, we're, holding on to our kids a little closer, doing things that maybe you've done but not done for a while, like, sit around and play a board game because you can't go to the park or the skate rink or something to that effect. So you are focusing on those things that really matter and the things that bind. It's been a little bit of a wake up call, I think, for everybody. Scary, to be fair, but it's been a wake up call, I think.
Yeah.
Another step that you told people, step number 2 is focus on managing your teams. So kind of talk us through what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think step number 1 to managing your team is understanding kind of who's who in the zoo. And I know I'm going to know more about my organization and my team after this is done than I ever knew, because we're starting to identify stuff that I never even really thought of. And, who are your people who are on leave, and who are your people who have a workers' comp situation, and, who's got elderly parents they're caring for, and who's got these other situations. And it was things we never even asked about. Maybe we weren't even supposed to ask about that we now know. And we're going to know people on another level. You got to manage that. And then again, to quote another column that we did not too long ago, you got to think about people's families, because people, employees, associates are part of a larger system outside of your workplace. And you have to acknowledge that, and you got to put things in place to protect those. And companies are going to be in cash crisis, and there's going to be some tough decisions that get made. We all have to figure out a way to protect people and their families. And kids are scared. And kids are seeing adults do things that they've never seen them do before. And they don't understand it. And we've got to figure out mechanisms to help them understand it, to help them work through it. That's actually a lesson my wife likes to teach me. And there's a good lesson inside of that. Because I'll be one to tend to say more of this, I'll control what I control. And I don't worry about what I don't control. I don't control COVID. I don't control any of those things going on. I do control my response and my organization's response. Where my wife will ground me more to this, hey, let's look at this more bigger global impact of this and what's the impact on the family and the kids and those things. But we have to our plans have to encapsulate that.
Well, and if memory serves, your wife is also an HR professional, correct?
Yeah, which is good and bad. So, yeah.
Well, that brings us naturally to communication.
Right?
Communicating with your team, right? Communicating with your team at this time.
So we've stepped it up, and I know everybody has. Zoom is going to end up being a big benefactor to this, and they deserve it. So they have a product that really works well. It's a great platform. I don't work for Zoom. I'm not paid for Zoom, but I'm really pleased with the platform and really pleased with the app's ability and ease of use. And honestly, with the load that it's getting, it's still running pretty smoothly. But we're really leveraging all these different channels of communication more so than ever. So we do here a manufacturing. HR does a startup call every morning. HR does a call where I have the entire HR team across the U.S. Everyone's on the team. Everyone gets a chance to talk. Everyone gets a chance to go through what we're working on. I have people who are now generalists in a tech center hearing the challenges in a manufacturing plant. And it's kind of that aha moment, like, hey, dummy, why weren't you doing this forever? And it's really expanding. We have our executive committee meets once a day to spend over an hour on this. We're doing a lot of non-traditional touch points. So we have a team building event on Tuesday, I think it is, for the HR team, Monday or Tuesday. I'm not sure which date they settled on. And they're doing some fun stuff. So they're getting baby pictures, and they're getting something that you did that will surprise everybody. And we're going to have some fun games, and we're all going to put Zoom on. We're going to start at around 8:30, 9 o'clock. So hopefully kiddos will be in bed. Everybody can have an adult beverage of their choice and sit down and just relax together. The executive committee is going to do it as well on April 1st. We're having an April 1st drink on Zoom. And I know my family has been doing nightly ones together, and our church is doing it. And my church has actually gone to the level where they have a program for children. They call it Little Saints, which I think is brilliant. And they're teaching little children about religion and about, God and everything. And they're using now that program on Zoom. And it's really to help kids deal with this and process this, and to help everyone deal and process with this. So we have to process this out loud.
The next three steps that you mentioned are all very similar. They're all about alignment, but you break it down from a leadership perspective, a team perspective, and customer perspective. So kind of talk about those.
Yeah, and I did it that way on purpose. So I think it's about, and this fits exactly my model for leadership anyways. I think, number one, we need to have a vision of what going through this process means. Number two, there has to be some strategy, and leadership has to be aligned on how are we executing this bigger strategy during this smaller period. And at the same time, how are we not losing our longer term steps? Then you break that down and you say, okay, to my teams now, what are my teams really working on? What are they doing? Where are they focused? What are they, what should we be doing? What shouldn't we be doing? How are people aligned? And then I put the customer alignment last. And everyone who knows me well knows customer service is my pet peeve. And one of the things that makes me irrationally react is when any business treats me as an interruption to their day and not as the reason for their day as a customer, right? So I drive that. I think customer service is most critical. So it's almost anomalous for me to put customers at the end of that chain. But I think if you do the first parts of the chain right, you build teams that do that third part better than you could ever do it with a customer service organization.
The next step you mentioned focuses on working times. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that goes along with our discussion that started off the call about how things have changed. So when should people be working? Should this be the traditional 9 to 5 that some of us started our career in? Yeah, I can remember when I started, it was more important for you to be at your desk at 7, and there was a group of senior people who would go and have oatmeal in the cafeteria. And you literally you were expected, no one actually said it, but you were expected to be there, be ready to go. He'd walk around and he'd collect up all his little minions, and like little ducklings, we'd follow him down to the cafeteria. We'd get our oatmeal and put your raisins and your brown sugar and your cream in it. And you'd walk back to your office, and everyone would go sit in their office and eat their oatmeal separately. But it was his check-in. And then at the end of the day, he would walk around and do what they used to call a bed check. And he'd walk around and see who was in their offices. And after he had come and said his, hello to you or whatever at the end of the day, then you were free to go. And that was the expectation. And it was a very FaceTime, open-closed type mentality. And this theory of one of the ladies I work with had her family earlier than I did, so she had a young child at the time. So she would leave at around 3, be home with her child, come back to work at around 6, and work until 9. And it was the biggest problem in the world. Oh, my God, everyone would talk about it, and it was so terrible. And it was just like the world was going to end because of this pattern. But now we're being forced to say, well, why not? Why shouldn't we be doing that? I support a global work base. So I have a global call with my partners in Japan. So the head of HR group and the general manager of global HR and myself have this global HR call. Well, we do it at 9 p.m. at night. And everyone says, well, why? So, well, Japan has got offset time than we do. Well, why don't you do it at 7 in the morning or do it at 5 p.m.? I said, well, no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave work. I'm going to come home. I'm going to be with my family. I'm going to eat dinner with my kids and my wife. I like to do my kids, help to do their bath. I like to get them ready for bed. I like to read them their stories, lay in bed with them. Once they're all asleep and put away, then I can go back to work. That's the mindset that we have to start to use as not just business, but community-wise. When should people be doing what tasks? And it's not necessarily 9 to 5. So if someone's working on something at 4:50 in the morning, that's what works for them. And if you respond to it at 9:26 p.m., that's what works for them. My caution there is something that Tracy Faber, who I worked for at Pepsi, who was the head of HR for Frito-Lay for our division, and now I think she's the head of HR for one of the big medical companies. But she told me one day, she said, you have to be careful because you work around the clock, which is fine, but you set expectations for people that that's what's expected. So be careful about the expectations that you set. You don't want to set an expectation for people that you need to be responsive every hour of the day to email. You do want people to have deliverables and be accountable to those deliverables. Let them manage their working days.
The final piece of this that you mentioned focuses on this idea of employee relations, and what you kind of said about that was around culture, and you've kind of already talked about that already, but just kind of, bring it into focus a little bit for us.
Yeah, and I'm going to use another example here. I'm very close with the HR team of DaVita in Denver, and really impressed with what they do, with their approach to community. If you look at what DaVita is doing right now is they're doing a lot of work in the community to ensure the community is okay during this crisis. I also have a very soft place in my heart for Pepsi and the time I spent there and what that organization does around community. And if you look at these organizations, their value system has said community is going to come first. They're putting community first. They're doing things to support their communities. not because it's going to drive their bottom line, but because it's the right thing to do. And these are the communities where they work. These are the communities where their employees are. And this is the communities where they live and exist. What I believe is the companies who are putting the community first today, tomorrow when this crisis has quote unquote passed, those communities will put those businesses first then. Mm-hmm. So I think if you are being a responsible partner today, you're going to be rewarded for that in the next phase of this. And I think there's other companies, I'm not going to name those like I did the good ones, but there's other companies who are putting profit first. And they're trying to profiteer from some of this. And they're looking to say, can I make a quick buck right now? Well, you might make a quick buck, but you're not going to make a long buck. And these communities are going to filter you out, and they're going to remember who you were. The same thing's going to happen at work. Our employees and our associates, they're going to remember how we are today. So tomorrow, if today I tell them you have to come to work and run these prototype parts, and I don't care, just come in and do it. Tomorrow when I tell them you're important to me, they're not going to believe you.
That's true. That's very true. I think this has been a great conversation. I think we've really kind of drilled into it, and we've really talked about it not just from a theory standpoint, but from a realistic standpoint. Like this is really what it is, and this is what we really need to be thinking about and how we really need to approach this.
And I appreciate you using this platform to get this message out, because it's an important message, and we need to use all our platforms to get these messages out. So if people want to join the conversation, I want to continue the narrative with you. So please find me on Twitter. This narrative is going on every day on Twitter. I'm at Eric Torigian. Find me on LinkedIn, Eric Torigian on LinkedIn. There's a hashtag, available talent. This narrative is going on. Come be part of it. Come engage with us. I have a YouTube channel, Lesson from the Corner Office. I'll have this podcast on there. My presentation's going to be on there. I have other tools on there. I have other tips on there for people. Join the narrative. Join the conversation. Be part of the solution.
Definitely. I could not have said it better myself. And that's what we at the HR Exchange Network are trying to provide as well, trying to provide those resources as best we can, while also providing resources just for, everyday kind of HR situations and trying to make sure that we are there, for everyone and trying to answer those questions and provide those opportunities and that information. Eric, you're a big part of that. Other advisory board members and HR professionals that I speak with are also a huge part of that. And to go back to your point, we're going to get through it, and we're going to get through it together. And all of those things are going to, point to a very different, but still a very exciting future for all of us. So definitely thank you for taking the time. I do hear your kids in the background. So they're probably tired of Dad talking about HR and want him to come talk about other things.
Exactly.
I appreciate you taking that time, and thank you for sharing your family a little bit with us and being available. So thank you again.
Thanks, Mason. I look forward to continuing the discussion. We'll talk soon.
That was Eric Torigian with Akebono Break USA. We appreciate his time, and we also appreciate your time. Stay tuned.